Welcome to LegacyCast, your source for hearing from top influencers, industry experts, and successful business owners who are telling their unique story about life, values, goals, business strategies, and the various causes they are so passionate about. Future generations will come to be impacted by what is happening today, whether positive or negative, and our mission is to focus on what is going to affect change for the better. Hosted each weekday by James Snow, a former U.S. Army combat medic, now founder and principal advisor of James Advisors Group, a full-service financial planning firm in North Texas. This is LegacyCast. Welcome, LegacyCast listeners. This is your host, James Snow, coming to you from North Texas. Still kind of north of the 70-degree mark here, still in Texas, even though we're sort of wintertime, I guess. But I have a wonderful guest coming to me today from North Dakota, Jodeen Bergstrom. And she's experiencing much cooler temperatures up there in North Dakota with ice and snow and what have you. So hopefully we'll keep the blizzards away from her for a long time. But, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jodeen onto the program. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. I just, while you were speaking of the temperature, I jumped on to see, and we're at 24 degrees, but it feels like 13. So, and we've unfortunately had some freezing rains the last couple of days. So like I had shared with you, I actually slid past my driveway coming in, but so winter is here. We're here. So.
Yes. Yeah, please keep it up there. And people in Texas cannot drive on ice. I'll tell you. I mean, they turn into crazy idiots down here when wintertime comes. So the longer it stays away, the happier I will be, because once it hits, just stay indoors, bug out, stay away from everything, because it's not worth it.
I hear you. We used to live in Breckenridge, Colorado, and it was always scary to see all the tourists come in with their four-wheel drive SUVs and thinking that they were empowered in the first snowstorm. Most of them were in the ditch because they didn't know how to drive.
Yeah, I've actually heard of people that make a living with their winches on their vehicles there in like Colorado and also New Mexico in the mountainous areas. Just wait for the tourists to go off the edge of the road and down a ravine, and extra money by winching them back out. So I guess, if you're looking for a retirement job, that might be something to do.
There you go.
So here on LegacyCast, I like to talk to people about what they're doing in their world, because like I like to tell people, a legacy is kind of your story, and it's your story telling what matters to you, what you're passionate about, the things that you're doing to solve problems, to help make life better for other people. And it's kind of your story told your way, so that it gives you sort of that little glimpse of immortality, if you will, to where you can make sure that generations from now know all those things about you, told through your words. So when you're thinking about a legacy, Jodeen, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for letting me be on here, and I'm excited to speak into your audience. And legacy for me definitely has a very strong meaning and very strong purpose in my life. About 11 years ago, I actually moved back to my home state to help my parents transition into elder age. And they were 81 and 80 years old, and they didn't have a will or an estate plan put together yet. And, it was obvious that it was time. And so I started helping them build out their estate plan. And I realized there was a lot of information, and they weren't really prepared to make all those decisions, because there's a lot more than just going to the lawyer and getting a will drawn up. And so, because as they wanted to leave their legacy, they had some land, and there were 6 of us, and they had grandchildren. So, they had worked through the depression and the hardships of, the dirty 30s and into their married life of, the 70s and 80s were not easy farming, but they managed to save and keep their farm, and they wanted to be able to give that to us children. So that's my first experience with legacy, realizing that there is, like you said, a lot more than just for them, it involved, the land and their heritage of what they'd worked so hard for.
Sure.
And so that became kind of my mission of how I got involved in legacy. I decided that I could not be the only family, or we could not be the only family out there that was struggling on trying to, get an estate plan put together. So
Mhm.
I started gathering all the information and wanted to put that into a course, and so that people could really understand what it does mean to build a legacy, because like you said, there's so much more involved, and how deep, and once you really get into it, do you want to leave like a video so that you can really speak into your great grandchildren that you might not ever see, or your great great grandchildren,
Right.
so that they can really hear your story and what you were. um, and it was interesting. One of my friends on Facebook, they gathered over the weekend, and they realized that their children really didn't know their grandmother, and they pulled out the old videos, and for the first time, their grandchildren really got to, quote unquote, meet their grandmother. And that was just very encouraging to realize that those are precious moments. And as we videotape things, or we put things out there, we don't really think much of it. But there comes a point where other generations do appreciate that, and they want to know more of your trials and tribulations, as well as your successes and your wins. And you can,
Sure.
to me, a legacy means that you can carry those on even after you're gone, and really speak into the next generation and generations to come, so that they know who you are and understand where you came from. It was kind
Yeah,
of a
and
long answer. I apologize.
well, actually, I do like your answer on so many levels. And I like that you're talking about being able to put into the future generations, because if we really start thinking about ourselves and our personalities, and sometimes even our personality traits and our gifts and talents, in so many ways, it seems like many of those things can pass through generations. And it seems like maybe a personality trait would be very similar to a grandparent, or the way that we handle things might be very similar to someone who was in our ancestry. So understanding who those people are, in a lot of ways, helps us to understand ourselves as well. And so I do appreciate the aspect of just being able to pass that information on, because so many families nowadays don't necessarily know the great grandparents, because people are waiting a little bit later in life to start families. And so knowing the fourth generation or the third generation in some cases just isn't there. And so like in my case, I only really knew one grandparent, or two grandparents rather, out of all four. And so I didn't get to know certain grandparents, and definitely didn't know great grandparents. So it is important to be able to have some sort of means. And even here on this podcast, something that I'm always very thoughtful of is that here in the 2018, about to be 2019, just the ability to put something onto a podcast and to put it onto the internet, knowing that perhaps 1 or 200 years from now, this information is still going to be out there, and hopefully still touching people much after the time that we're gone. And so all of these things are part of our legacy and what we're doing to affect change.
Exactly. And you talk about heritage and whatnot, and even a little bit further back for me on legacy. um, my mother was a very she has passed on, and so she um, lived to be 91, and was a wonderful woman. And the thing that she really was in was the genealogy. And so I was probably, well, I mean, it started, I'm sure, at birth, but she really, about the time I was about 9 or 10, is when she really, really got into it. And so what she did is, she actually, back then, it was the hand crank. We still had one of those hand crank copy machines, because my mom was a kindergarten teacher. And so the original ones were on that. And then she actually went into I think the newspaper, and actually made an actual copy machine, used a copy machine. But she wrote out a little form that said your name, birthplace, and all of your children, and but she had a little form that she filled out, and I'm the youngest of 32 grandchildren. She had 9 siblings. And so she started, researching and trying to figure out more of her heritage. And on her father's side is where she was really intrigued, because he came from Germany and got off the boat, and he homesteaded here in North Dakota. And my other set of grandparents on my dad's side, there were 3 that got on the boat, and it was my great grandfather, my grandfather, and then it was my grandmother. And when they got off the boat, there was only 2 signatures, and it wasn't really talked about, but our understanding is that she actually passed on the boat. And so, it's things like that, if we don't relay them on to the next generation, people don't know it and they don't understand it. And that's part of our heritage. And I think that that's, a legacy that we can, in, our technology and everything that we've got, I just look at the effort that my mom went through. First she hand wrote this little thing up, and then she typed it all out, and she mailed it out, and each person, this is the internet back then, mailed it out to everybody, waited for everybody to bring it back. And then what she did is she copied all those pages, and I think she made a total of, I think there was like almost 100 books that she made when she first put it all together. But it was a big, thick binder. Ours was in a binder because we made a special binder for her. But, she went to a lot of work to really preserve our heritage. And, everybody really appreciated that. And then she would, about every year or 2, she would send out another form, or she would encourage people to, call or send back in the updated information. And then she would handwrite that in, or, she would send out a little slip of paper to everybody and say, so-and-so had babies, or, Uncle William, he died. So, we need to mark down his death. And, so that's where I really got into the heritage of all of it, and kind of preserving it, and got exposed to it, I should say. And then, like I said, when, now for me, it's important because my mother has passed on, and, it's time for me to make sure that I give out information that's going to be appropriate, and, preserving it so that everybody knows, really where we came from, what is our background. Because, it used to be, for me, it was a big thing growing up in a small town. Everybody talked about, well, what nationality are you, Norwegian or German? Because that's really the only really the only 2 things up here, and because that's our influx of people that came in. They were either Norwegian or German, and there was some Swiss too, because my dad was a little bit of Swiss. But nowadays, I've got 5 daughters, and I've asked them, do you ever say what nationality you are, or what your heritage is? And they just look at me like, what are you talking about? So it's not something that's talked about, very much anymore. So I think that that's really important too, that we keep that alive and going, because that's an aspect, and a lot of it is we're all mixed, and there's a lot more. It's not that you're just Norwegian or German anymore, because now even with me, I'm Norwegian and German with a little bit of Swiss in there too. So
yeah, and it is important to understand all of those things, and the genealogy that people have, that is something that's very important, because it, like I say, it goes to telling a lot of things about us that we may not realize it came from a particular part of our family. I have some American Indian heritage, as well as Scots Irish and Dutch and Welsh and who knows what else from Europe, bettering up a bunch of different things. But kind of understanding those different parts of my heritage does explain a lot of the things about my personality. Being extremely proud, for example, I can immediately correlate that to my Native American side, because that side of the family is all the same way. Extremely proud, sometimes to a fault. So, but it's very helpful.
It is. And I think the other thing too, it speaks a lot about, where we're at. And the other thing too is, leaving that legacy of what you really wanted to accomplish in life too, because, I think she even had in there, definitely the birthdays and the anniversaries, but I think she, even had something as far as, um, what was your greatest accomplishment? And, which is nice to, see something
Yeah,
like that in there too. So,
it is. That actually kind of goes over to something that was one of my next questions is do you feel like it's important that people actively consider what their legacy is going to be on many different levels, and then in turn uh, taking that consideration and acting with deliberate actions, and using that to make very intentional choices? Do you think that's important?
yes, it is. And I think, as um, I speak into a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are new, young to money, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that you can do with money. One, it can tear your family apart if there's not a precise and known plan, because there's
Mhm.
interpretations. Like, unfortunately, I went through an ugly situation with my siblings where there was a lot of greed, and when it came time for the estate planning, there were 6 different interpretations of what mom and dad wanted. So if you
Right.
don't, have clarity, and, sometimes you have to have some tough love. If you got a lazy Larry or a sassy Susan in your genealogy, then,
Mhm.
it's important to make sure that you are, you're addressing those situations before it gets out of hand. Because what happens is, um, then when it comes time for that money to be passed down or handed down, if there's not clear, concise understanding of what you want done with that. If you want to donate part of that to an endowment for scholarships, or my mom was a teacher, so she really had a thing for education, and so
Mhm.
if you don't have those specifics in there, um, your true being of you've worked so hard and what you really wanted to do, if that's not noted, and that's not um, carried out, then to me it's kind of all in vain. So I think it's really important to stress what you want to do, and how you want to leave that behind. And that's the importance of having a guardian, so that you choose somebody that is kind of your commandant, and will, if it comes a point where they need to step in, they will, and ensure that your wishes are carried out. Because as we work so hard for everything, we as children, um, we shouldn't expect entitlement. And I think a lot of people think that sometimes. Um, you know, Municipality, we're all, the umbilical cord was cut a long time ago.
Mhm.
And, that means that, we each need to, do our own thing. And if mom and dad want to leave everything to Goodwill, then, let that be their wishes, and make sure that that's carried out. So yes, documenting it is very important. And, if you do have some money and you want to, I look at Dolly Parton. I think she's probably the best example of this. She's got the Dolly Library, and any child under the age of 5 that goes to her website and signs up, she sends a free book every month to that child from birth till 5. And I just think, how amazing is that? What a legacy, to
Yep.
impact and to change lives. And that's something I know, and I'm sure will be carried on, even long after she's gone.
Oh, I'm
So,
sure. And I do also appreciate how you're putting the explanation of with your family in this situation, the importance of putting those wishes down, because the way I tell a lot of people is you're putting those wishes together, whether it be a will or a trust, what have you, even things to the extent of putting together life insurance wishes,
mhm.
is when you're doing those things, it's the ultimate I love you to your family, because you're putting your wishes together, but you're also taking a lot of that burden away from them. Because when that time comes, they're at the worst possible moment in life, probably. It's one of their most painful moments, and to be able to take that away, to take that extra burden away from them, is really, in my book, the ultimate I love you, because you've already crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and you've taken care of that, so that all that they have to do is think about where they're at that moment. and not have to think about, okay, what did mom and dad want? What did, Uncle James want? Those kinds of things. Nobody has to worry about that. And you're
Exactly.
also able to put into action to make sure that you can take care of those people, so that those next concerns of, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for the house, or how are we going to be able to pay for these these estate costs and so forth, all of those things, you're also able to take care of those concerns. So the immediate and then the follow-up concerns can be taken care of. And so it is very important. And like I say, it's, in my book, it's the ultimate I love you to your family, is saying, I love you enough that I don't want you to have to worry about this. And so,
Exactly.
oh, please go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, one in the course that we do, we call it the I Love You bundle. And what it means is we package everything together so that, because the thing is even as a husband and wife, one might be paying the bills, but if something happens to the person that's paying the bills,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully couples are working together, but a lot of times everybody kind of does their own thing. And so if they don't know, where all the accounts are at, or, the IRAs, or, so what we do is we actually gather through, in the course that I built out, we actually go through and gather all that important information. And then we put it in the love bundle. And that means that when the time comes, you can, tell somebody that, here's the lock and key. I love you guys enough that I don't want you to have to go through even any more sorrow. And, I just think of, there was a lady that reached out to me on Facebook, and her husband suddenly died of a heart attack unexpectedly. And
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't sure what she was going to do. And, she announced that she had lost him. And if anybody, because he had kind of a small business too, if anybody needed anything, to contact her. She had his phone, and she was trying to pick up all the pieces. And the importance of, especially in our digital world, make sure that you have some system in place for your digital passwords, because some of that information you can easily get locked out of, and eventually you can get back into it, but it may take a death certificate to get that happen, and it can cause a lot of hardship. And so I
Sure.
always tell people to make sure that those kinds of things are written down, or you're communicating, where to find them or how you're doing them. So that way, because a sudden death, there's enough stress already. And then all of a sudden you've got to, figure out where the checking accounts are, or what's going to be shut down because, how are they set up? Are they dual accounts? Or, there's just a lot of stress. And, I had reached out and just said, if she needed anything, let me help her. And then, a day later, she came back and she said she actually found out that because she was afraid she was going to have to go back to her 9-to-5 job, because she had a small business that she was doing. And she was afraid about losing the house. So not only was it the death, and I just felt for her, because here she had the loss of her husband, but that her main focus and her biggest fear was, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive?
Right.
And that's a scary feeling. And that shouldn't be. She should be able to honor his death. And not that I'm saying that, but she should be able to mourn that, and be able to be available for her children. And, but, she went right into the panic mode of financial, how am I going to take care of this? And then she did put out, a couple days later, that she found out her husband had taken out a an unknown life insurance policy through work. And it was going to be enough to cover, and that's one thing I want to stress to people that are listening.
Mhm.
I encourage you to really look up in your state of how much it costs to die, because everybody thinks that it's, oh, I'm just going to die. There's a lot of expenses that go into that, and it's anywhere from 12,000 to 15,000 up to $25,000, depending on the state that you live in, to be buried. To cover all the costs that are involved in that, and people don't realize that. And that bill doesn't go away, because that's the mortuary, that's the funeral. That's
Yep.
flowers, and I'm saying you can cut back on those things, but that's a real expense. And if you aren't responsible, and if you don't, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Do you want to leave a legacy? Think of that wife and those children. Think of how much their legacy changed, or his legacy changed in their mind, knowing that he had provided that life insurance so that those expenses, they weren't going to lose their home. Now they get to stay in their home. I've talked to so many people that, unexpected death, and they, the mom had to, go back to work, and they almost lost the house, and some of them did lose the house. And, just that turmoil, it's
Mhm.
enough turmoil losing somebody, but then to have all that financial burden, it can really be very, very, very painful and detrimental to everybody. So that's why it's important to, document those things, put those wishes down. And, it's okay, if you don't want to tell them about life insurance policies. I think that that's something that's a personal, you gotta, but at the same time, make sure that you're being responsible and leaving something, because if you don't, you're leaving that to your family to have to pick up the pieces.
Right. And just in addition to the keeping of the home is one of the things, especially for younger families, that I will tell is when you have children, maybe they're in sports, or they're in band, or maybe a daughter is in ballet or gymnastics, or whatever the activities are that the children are in. Think about what those expenses are, because if something happens to one of the parents now while they're still young, all of those things are in jeopardy. And then that child's
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
future education could be in jeopardy. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it's thinking about all of those things and then just making appropriate steps, because it doesn't have to break the bank to take those appropriate steps. It just takes time. And this is one of those areas where I'm glad that I work with a lot of veterans, is because they can they have a thicker skin. We're a little thicker skinned on this. And so I'll suck it up. Just suck it up. Swallow your pride, suck it up, make the decision, have this conversation. It's not a fun conversation to have, but have it, because once you have it and you're done with it, then it gets a lot easier. But you do have to have that conversation. Just ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It's just like you ignore taking care of your teeth. They're not going to get better. They will go away. And so these financial problems are only going to get worse if you don't have that conversation. And so it is very important. And so many families, I've seen situations where a spouse passes away, and then another spouse is forced to not only either make that decision of what do I do with the home, but sometimes in order to keep the home, they go into a quick rebound marriage in order to keep the things, keep their security. And then what is that going to do to the kids? What is that going to do to that person, having to make those kinds of decisions that, taking a little bit of time probably was more appropriate, but they didn't do it because of what they could have lost. And so it's just really, taking care of things the right way. Give the family the proper opportunity to mourn, and take care of, making sure that your spouse is able to stay in the home. Not having to make those.
Exactly. And one thing I want to speak into this right now, because I have come across so many people in, the line of work that I've done with this. If there is a remarriage,
Mhm.
please, especially if you've come, if your family has left you some money, and you have something, please make sure that it is documented and that the children know about it. I have come across so many people that have found out after probate that there was actually wills out there, and they just weren't presented. And one extreme, the mother actually went off to Europe and blew the whole estate because she didn't present the will. And the daughter was left, just trudging, trying to make ends meet, only to find out, after the mother had come back from this, rendezvous for 6-7 years, that there was a will, and it just wasn't honored. And so, and another situation where there was a mother that had gotten some financial endowments, and remarried, and then she passed away, and with the understanding and belief that her children would get that. And 6 months before the stepfather passed away, there was a new will written out, and everything was changed. And that happens. And don't be naive to think that it's not going to happen. And I know we get into love and we think that love's gonna, oh, they'll do what I say because they love me. Well, I can tell you, after you're gone, if there is not documentation and people that know about the documentation so that they can find it, people are greedy, people are mean, people are deceptive. And so I'm just telling you right now to, make sure that you document that when you're in a marriage, a remarriage, because I've heard so many heartbreaking stories where, how their lives could have been so changed had, they received what was rightfully theirs.
Yeah, and the latter example that you're giving is actually a very example that happened to my own mother, to where her mom had remarried and had a will. She thought that everything was in order. I mean, she was a legal attorney, I believe it was. And so she thought that she had everything, all the I's dotted, T's crossed, and she passed. Her husband then received everything instead of my mom, which is not the way she wanted it. And he in turn sold off, assets. And so, instead of my mom taking those things, he took it and benefited from it. His children benefited from it, and my mom was left with none of it.
That's so sad.
That's not what her mom intended, but
right.
So it's it's taking the steps to see that all those things are done, but then make sure that they're reviewed. Take it to legal counsel, have them review it. It may cost a little bit of money, but look at what it saves. So it's following the correct steps.
Right. And I always say too is to make sure that leave note of the lawyers that did draw things up, because they have the legal copy. Especially if people move out of state and whatnot, it's real easy to that paper trail to get lost. But always, be aware of, which lawyers did put it together, because that's another asset that you can definitely take to court. And there's just proper ways of doing it, and make sure that you document and the other thing too is let it be known. I think we're getting better, but I do see where a lot of times there were a lot of people that didn't talk about it. And so my mom's generation is a perfect example of that. This is kind of our business. We don't we don't discuss these things because that's just how it is, where I don't feel that is healthy. I think transparency is the best way to do it, because and there's so many people that I talk to, they're like, we think mom and dad got it together, but we don't really know. And also you guys need to be real about the cost of getting old. My parents were on self-pay, and it cost them $21,000 a month to be in the nursing home. They didn't have long-term care. They didn't have insurance. And so, every month it was a check written for $21,000.
Wow.
That's expensive.
That is.
So, I always tell people, one, figure out how much it's going to cost you to die. And two, figure out how much it's going to cost you or your family to ensure that you're taken care of in elder age.
Yeah, and there's also kind of leans, you were touching on it earlier, with a person's business, is making sure that these same things that you do for your family are in place for your business. Because when you have a business, ideally you're going to be able to grow it and scale it to where you have employees, and those employees are dependent upon that business being operational and liquid. And so just making sure that you have business plans in place and financial plans in place for the business, so that when the key person is taken out of that equation, that there is some succession figured out. Does the spouse or do the children want to take over the business? And if not, make sure that you have that put together to where someone else can step into your shoes and can take over the business.
Exactly.
But it's on properly, so that business is still operating long after. Because we don't start a business just for it to end when we end. we start those businesses hoping that it's going to help affect change in the world that's positive, and so we want to make sure that it is still in place. And again,
And
like
the
I
thing
mentioned,
is, you got to understand. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was going to say, and like I mentioned, is you have employees, and those employees have families, and they're depending on that paycheck. And so just taking that due diligence to make sure that if something happens to you as the business owner, or even a key person in the business, even if you're not just the business owner, but maybe a partner or one of the C-level executives, making sure that those things are in place. Because when you take those people out, then it does have a financial impact on the company.
Exactly. And I think it's really important because, nowadays, so much of our world is digital, and things can go on without, one person in the program. So you need to make sure that that businesses are set up and secure so that you can, if something does happen to you, people know, how things are going to be turned over. And I think you can't be naive to think that it's not going to happen to you. You need to be aware of it, be prepared, because if you're prepared, more than likely it's not going to happen. But I always go back to Las Vegas. There were 59 people that felt that they were going to have plenty of time to do whatever they needed to do, and
Right.
in a moment's notice, their lives were taken, and they ended up affecting so many other lives. And I always think of the hardship of we really do not ever know how long we're going to be here on earth. And so always be prepared, and make sure that you've got things in place, and that you're discussing your wishes, because I've heard so many people that the husband wanted to be cremated, but yet the uncle or the brother or the mother walked in and said, "Oh no, we're having a full-fledged," and they barely had enough money to cover the funeral costs, because instead of him being honored in his wishes of being cremated, it was a full-fledged funeral, and those get expensive.
Yeah,
So
very, very true, very true. And you were mentioning the long-term care thing. Is what a lot of people don't realize is 1 in 4 people are going to have some sort of disability in their life. And so just making sure that that side of it, your paycheck is covered, so that if you become disabled, if or when, then you're able to make sure that your family doesn't lose their house because of that disability event. And then in turn, as we get older, looking at the long-term care event, to where can your children quit their job in order to take care of you? Because that's the reality of what ends up happening if you don't take those steps, is that someone is going to have to care for you. And can they do it physically? Can they do it emotionally to provide that care? And if not, who will? So you have to think about that, and then
all right.
what the repercussions and impact is, and try to mitigate that impact. The more decisions we make today, are the fewer decisions that our family has to make later, and those decisions are made with an emotional twist. And so try to take some of that hardship out of it, because making an emotional decision is not always the best one.
Exactly. And I think the big thing too is just start researching. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, for your people listening, I do have a free course, and it's got it whatever state you're in, or if you're in Canada, it does work up there as well. But I always say, it's enough information to get you going, so that when you have to go to the lawyers, you can ask the right questions. By all means, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving any legal advice. I'm not an investment broker or anything like that. I am just a human being that has went through the process and realized that there's a lot of information. It can be overwhelming. So, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and it's just a quick, I have it set up where it's like a 4-week course. But you can do it however you want. It's all got videos, and all the PDFs and the downloadables are there, and it gives you a lot of references and different things. And I'm always adding to it too. But I'd like to leave that as a gift for your tribe, anybody listening out there. And just a point for them to start, because there's every estate plan is unique. There's always idiosyncrasies that there's just little things that are different for everybody. and that's fine. And this just gives you the opportunity to, start looking and getting planning and at least get something down. My biggest thing that I want to stress too is if you have children under the age of 18, please understand that accidents can happen, tragedies can happen. And if both birth parents pass away and there's no written documentation of who they want to raise their child, if something were to happen to both of them,
Mhm.
those children can be thrown into the social service or into the system. And because all it takes is somebody to come in, Sister Mary comes in and says, "Oh no, William wanted me to take care of the kids. We talked about it all the time." And then, you know, Bob comes in and says, "Oh no, they said I was going to raise them. We had a lot of beers and we talked about, And so all of a sudden the judge has to look and they've got two families fighting over these kids.
Mhm.
And, he can say, "You know what? Until we get this settled out, we're going to put them in foster care." And you see it happening more than what you think. And those are the kinds of things that, I hope that's enough motivation. I don't like to, talk about the bad things, but unfortunately, when it comes to estate planning, sometimes
Mhm.
that's the only motivation that people really, really move on. And, go through and get some type of documentation as far as, what that can ensure the transition, because children are the ones that it's hard for them to understand what's going on anyway. And then you throw on top of that, all of a sudden they're being thrown into, the foster care system. That can be really, really hard to do. So if you have children under the age of 18, please make sure that you are not naive to think that you don't have to, we don't own anything, we don't have a house or we're still renting. You've got probably the most precious commodity there is, and that's your children. And make sure that you are documenting and taking care of that and being responsible, because
Mhm.
at any point anything can happen. So
It's very true, and an important tip that you're putting there. Texas, here where I'm at, Texas is a probate state, and so if something happens and those wishes are not put into place, you know, your your decisions are not going to be adhered to if you don't write it down. And
yep.
there is a caregiver for your children, and it's called the state, and the state will
Hmm.
make it. If you don't make it, the state will make it for you. Just as if you don't have a will put into place, the state has one for you, and you're not going to like it. And so I tell people,
Exactly.
don't let the state make that decision for your family, because it's going to be in the interest of the state, not of your family. And so, don't leave that to chance.
Yep. I just say, like I say, it's just really crucial to, leave a legacy to your child. Um,
Mhm.
and that's even if you don't have any money, even if you don't have, even if times are tough, that's a huge legacy that you can leave to your loved ones, that doesn't cost you any money. Just to have that documented and make sure that and speak to the people too that you really want, and put that information in the safety deposit box so that everybody knows that that's where it's at. Um,
That's true. So, with you and your business, Jodeen, how would you say that your personal values and beliefs play a role in what you're doing personally?
well, it's interesting you should note that, because I'm actually in transition right now. My husband, or ex-husband, after 33 years, walked out. And
Oh,
so I'm actually rewriting my purpose and beliefs and core values. And so, it's kind of an interesting new chapter. And now leaving my legacy, is even more important to me, because, I don't want my grandchildren and great grandchildren to, feel like I, divided the family or division it, because I fought really hard to keep it together. So, I'm documenting that. I'm letting them know that, grandma was in there fighting for the family and trying to keep it together. So that, living up to my values, and I've been kind of a holding spot, because I've had to really go back to those core purposes and
mhm.
beliefs, and really evaluate, were they serving me. And some of them I had to kind of rewrite, and so that I could be authentic to myself, and move forward in the, because we all get things thrown at us, and we can either stay down or we can stand up and say, you know what, we're gonna make the best of this. And so, that's right now I'm in that process. I'm not 100% in clarity yet because it takes some time, when you've got 33 years where you're, thinking you're going one direction and all of a sudden now you gotta rewrite things. So, but I think it's very, very, very important. And I just put a post on this the other day. Um, most people will spend more time trying to figure out what they're going to do on their summer vacation than what they will do with their life plan. And I think, I'm a strong person in personal development and mental well-being. And there's no excuse other than the fact that everybody has become comfortable being busy, doing nothing, scrolling on our social media, watching TV. And, is that really building a legacy? Is that really giving you, that time can be spent in personal development, that time can be building relationships. Because that was the biggest thing that I learned with my mom and dad passing. Because I was doing it, I didn't realize it, but the jealousy that my siblings had towards me was based on the fact that I had a relationship with my parents. When I was the youngest of six, and so the economics were a little bit different too. That's something you gotta understand. So I was able to go to Germany with them because my mom, like I said, she was into genealogy. My brother happened to be stationed over there. And so we went tomb hopping over in Germany, and I was the only one that got to go. So of course, I was the spoiled one, but it's pretty hard to leave a 12-year-old home for 2 weeks and think they're going to survive.
Well,
But
true.
either way, with that, I developed a relationship with my parents because when I moved out, I went to a little resort town, and my mom and dad, they hadn't been off the farm. I mean, I think we went on 1 or 2 vacations. Well, in fact, I remember 2 vacations. One was the Faces down at Mount Rushmore, because South Dakota is just, a couple hours away. And the other one was to Germany. Other than that, our summers were spent in the field. We were farmers, And so once in a while we would go to a little Medora, the little resort town that I was working on. But my gosh, when I graduated, my mom and dad were down there like 7, 8, like every other weekend they were there. And I was like, good grief, are you following me or what? But at the same time, I realized, they had children in the house for like 48 years, so the empty nest was hard for them. And two, it was fun and they enjoyed it. But the more, I embraced them. I wanted them to be around me. And when I moved away for 20 years, if I didn't call my mom 2 to 3 times a week back before pre-plans, I mean, it was a budget in our income, $200 to $300 for phone bills because I called my mom regularly. And, if I had a question, I called and I asked her, and I honed in and I really made that relationship. And because I did that, and my parents came out to visit us, and we came up here, the kids stayed, and I was very intentional about my children spending a couple of weeks every year with my mom and dad so that they got to visit the farm and they got to experience them. And oh, mom and dad are raising your kids, you drop them off up there for 2 weeks, and it's like, that's their grandma time. They're experiencing, being with their grandmother, but that jealousy, it didn't make sense at the time. But now as I step back and I, have a clearer picture of everything, I realized that they never took the time to develop those relationships. And part of it too was I was a little bit more, I think when you have children, there's always one pea that's a little bit more like you when you're in the pod. And my mom and I were 2 peas in a pod, and so many people have said, you're so much like your mom. And I'm like, yep, I am. So, those relationships are so important, because that is what's going to drive you in the long run is, those relationships. And, you're not going to build a relationship with your loved ones if you are constantly looking at social media or, tuned into the TV, because those kids, they're not going to remember you. They're going to remember that you sat in front of the TV, and they're going to remember you, scrolling through your phone, which I think we've all gotten a bad habit of doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. So often, when I'm out, maybe at a restaurant or at a coffee shop, and I look around, and you have so many people that could be interacting, yet you'll have families sitting at the table, and their noses, every nose is in a phone, and it's like, why are you not having conversations with each other? And sometimes they're even texting each other at the very table, that they're all
Right.
sitting together having a text conversation instead of a verbal one, which blows my mind. But that's that's one of the
That's
things
another
that
story.
our
That's another
generation,
podcast.
our generation probably should step away from that, and have a little more real time, Sunday dinner around the table, that kind of a thing, not not TV trays all over the house.
Well, and even, I commend Chick-fil-A. I've always watched that, kind of always use them as a mentor, doing business and everything. They've just modeled things so well. Um, and I, honor them for what they're doing is, you can actually put your phone in the box while you're eating, to ensure that, you aren't scrolling and that you are building that relationship. So
Mhm.
I think I wish more people would take the lead of that. And we have gotten even too where everybody has to put their phone, like, especially if we go out to eat. We've gotten to where we've, put your phone face down and, nobody can touch it. So, and sometimes you got to set those boundaries so that you can build
Mhm.
those relationships. So I was at a
Sure.
basketball game, and I turned around and there was about 10, 12 kids there, and every one of them had their head down and their thumbs were just moving like crazy. And I thought, you know, when I was sitting on those bleachers, there was never even a thought of that happening. We were, bumping each other around or laughing or, braiding hair or, doing, interacting. But I mean,
Mhm.
they were quiet because I thought, I was like, wow, that's kind of a quiet area. And I just kind of looked around and I was like, they're not even talking to each other. That is crazy.
Yeah, a
So
ball game.
at a ball
What's
game. Yep.
what's
Yep.
wrong with watching the game?
Yep. So,
So when you were starting your business, were there particular hurdles that you had to overcome when building that out?
well, I've actually built four different businesses from the ground up. First, I had a flower shop in Breckenridge, Colorado, and that was a lot of struggle because I had a degree in flower shop and greenhouse management from NDSU Botano. And you kind of think, well, they've prepared me, right? I've paid this money, so I'm going to know how to do this. And like, I did not have any assets in my back pocket to be able to do what I was trying to do. And it was very frustrating because at the time, Colorado didn't have any flower shop associations for the state level. So, I really couldn't, I ended up going to the Small Business Administration, and, they kind of helped. I got in touch with the SCORE member and helped me going. And so, that was a big struggle. If you don't know how to start things or where to get it, but nowadays, and that was 30 years ago. Nowadays with the internet, you can definitely Google and find things a lot easier and a lot quicker. And my daughter was down the other day, and she's got a big project that she's handing in, and she's actually having to hand in a business plan for her marketing uh, class, and just kind of going through. And I was like, well, how are you going to do this, or what do and she's like, oh, internet, Google. Google it. So I think any business can have struggles, but it's all how diverse you are. And, I mean, I have a lot of tenacity, so I usually go at things until I get the answer. And so, I research until I find what I need. But I think everybody, you can make it as difficult as you want. And so my big thing is lean into people, find a mentor that is doing what you want to do, and ask them to guide you, because that will save you a lot of time, definitely.
Yeah, those are some valuable resources. SCORE, Small Business Administration, and having mentors. Those are three things that I
Mhm.
recommend people to look into.
Yep. Hmm.
Would you say that your tenacity is your greatest character strength, or do you think that there's another that you would?
I think my tenacity gets me sometimes, but it's probably a good character trait to have. Um, I didn't realize it, but I'm actually a very good networker. I don't have a problem talking to people. I reach out. One of the last business, well, not the last, but My third business that I built was a restaurant, and we're in the oil boom. And so, you know, we did anywhere from 850 to $1 million for 7 years, just selling milkshakes and flipping burgers, which is kind of unheard of in the food and beverage industry, not having alcohol in there. But we in that 7 years, I probably spent a total of about $2,000 in marketing because it was word of mouth. We had a great product. We ground our own meat and we added our own seasoning. And it's funny because we just closed that down about a year ago. And now the oil boom is kind of picking up here in North Dakota. And it's funny the number of phone calls I get because these guys kept our restaurant number in their phones and they're calling asking for burgers. And you know, we're closed, so it was I had my phone number, my cell phone listed there, and so a lot of people have reached out trying to buy burgers, and we're no longer in business. But you know, when you have a great product, that's something that's very, very important. And being able to you know, build relationships, and that's what I did with a lot of the guys, and that's why they remember me. I always did table touches, even though we were, you know, kind of a divey burger joint. I always checked on everybody, and we encouraged the waitresses to, you know, find out, because these guys were coming and leaving their families, and you know, we made sure they didn't give them their phone numbers, but they, you know, just to be nice to them and engage and find out how their day is. And the guys really appreciated that. They came back to us because they knew it was kind of a family, or it was a family away from their home. And I'd always kind of joke when people would be on there. We had a lot of guys that Skyped and FaceTimed their family. And I'd always be like, no, you can't be on your phone while you guys are eating. You know, we got to have that conversation. And they're like, but this is my family. And, you know, so I'd be waving in the background and photobombing them and getting to know the kids and stuff. So just really you know, even though it was just a burger joint, we still took the time to engage in our clientele, and they remembered us, and they served us well. They came back time and time again.
That's good. Now, what would you say your greatest character weakness would be then?
Oh, my teenagers would probably say I'm too mean. My youngest daughter came home from when she came into high school, and she goes, well, Mom, she goes, you don't have to worry about me dating. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, all the boys are scared of you. They'll never ask me out. And I was like, yes, I finally got it right on the last one. You know, so I think probably my weakness is, you know, I get to, I'm a big thinker. And so, you know, I'm always thinking of, I see something and I want to teach people how to do things. And yeah, I could see even in my girls' relationships that, you know, when they do something, I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. But did you think of this? You know, and so that's one of the character traits that I'm trying to not have as strong, and just appreciate what they're doing and not always trying to teach them how they could do it. And I'm never saying that they could do it better. It's just my mom was a teacher. And so I've got that eye of, you know, when I see something, I'm a problem solver. So, you know, if you talk to me and you got a problem, we're going to figure out how we can solve it for you. And that's probably not always a good character trait to have.
I guess good in the right setting.
Right.
So where do you get your best ideas? Do you have a particular place you like to go to when you're brainstorming to come up with different thoughts?
I am gifted with the sixth sense. So there's just things that I feel very strong on, and I know it's the right thing. And I've always, you know, tuned into my instincts. I'm right brain, so I'm very creative. Like I said, I used to have the flower shop. I'm very artistic. And so, you know, in my element, I'm very right brained, and to me, I don't see it as a talent. It's just something that I do. But I do know that it is a talent that I have. And and I garden a lot too. So, and I'm kind of artistic and getting the flowers and everything together. So I guess overall, that's probably, you know, my artistic is recharge as I go out into nature and really listen to nature and take notes from them.
That's a good place. Yeah, I like nature as well. So I can certainly relate with that. So in winding up, I have a final question for you. Yeah, it's kind of a trivia question, if you will.
Okay.
Uh, to tell us something about you that most people don't know. Kind of that trivia thing there.
Um, a lot of people don't know that I actually went to a one-room school, the country school. You talking about the legacy and relating it back to that. My great grandfather and grandfather built the school. My dad graduated from the school, and then my mom taught there. And of the six siblings, or I have five siblings, there were six of us all together. I'm the only one that didn't graduate from. It's called House White School, and so I went first and second grade. I had students grades 1 through 8, and the first year I went, we had 6 students, and then the last year in my second grade, we went to down to 4 students, grades 1 through 8, and Mrs. Kraft was my teacher. And during that time, we have the bookmobile, and we still have a bookmobile that comes around, but the bookmobile would come out, and my first grade, I wrote 382 book reports, and they actually had to bring like extra books out to me because like I had read all the books in the bookmobile.
Grief.
So that's kind of, a lot of people don't know that about me.
Wow, that would be fun though. I think going to the old fashioned quote unquote schools, with just the one room schoolhouse. I think that'd be fun.
Yep. The only thing scary about it is back then, and part of the reason they closed it down, well, part of lack of kids, but they had they actually would start a fire in the bottom of the pits that was their sewer. That's how they took care of the toilets. And so it was attached to like the entrance of the school, but it was like an outhouse, because it had this long pit that went down, and then they actually just burned. That was their sewer system, because there was no sewer out there. And so my mom's biggest fear was that I was going to fall in the toilet. That's because I was so little. That was her biggest fear. And then we packed a lunch. We had a kind of little house on the prairie. We had a lunch every day that we packed. My dad packed it for me because my mom worked in the school systems, and so my dad usually packed lunch for us. And then eventually we went to town school, and we actually got to have like a lunchroom. That was so exciting for me. There was actually a cook that cooked our lunch. Oh,
That's good stuff. Sounds fun. Well, Jodeen, I appreciate you taking time this afternoon to be with us, and I want to give the listeners some information as far as how to get a hold of you. Whether it be websites, emails, what have you. So, what are the best ways for them to reach out and be able to touch base with you and be able to contact you personally?
well, there is a free group on Facebook, and it's called Legacy Calling, and I'll make sure we get the link to you so that you can, if you have any print, that they can see it as well. But and I will make sure I drop the free membership site to you, to all of you. I encourage you guys to take part in that estate planning. At least get in there and get going with it, and see what you can do to leave your legacy, because that simple task of just going through your estate plan and getting a will or a trust in place can make a huge difference on the legacy that you leave, not only your children, but your grandchildren and your great grandchildren. So legacy calling on Facebook would be the easiest way. And then I will drop you guys the link.
Okay, very good. And Jodeen, I appreciate again your time being here this afternoon. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be able to sit down with you and get to know you a little bit better, and the different views that you have on legacy and what that means to people, because it is such a valuable thing, and people should be thinking about it. If not daily, at least regularly, they should think about it.
Exactly. And, like I say, take more time than what you're planning your summer vacation, and make sure that you do have a life plan and a goal of, what you want to leave. And even, I understand not every one of us are going to make the millions, and we're not all going to have, millions and millions of dollars to leave for our grandchildren. But you can still make an impact, and you can still leave a legacy by, speaking into them, and even something as simple nowadays. Everybody's got a cell phone. Even if you're on social service and welfare, those people, sometimes they had better phones than I did. But there's no excuse for you not to have some type of video, and leave, just speak
Mhm.
into people. And even if it's just an audio, probably one of the most treasured thing that I have right now is, there was a guy that was doing some research on the history in this area, and they knew that my mom was very strong on everything that had went on here. And so he interviewed her when he was in the nursing home, and he came by and dropped the link. So I have about a 4-hour conversation altogether. He did it a couple different times, of this guy just interviewing my mom and speaking into her, her giving him the information of all the things that went on. And that's probably, that's the biggest treasure. Even though that my mom and dad, they were fortunate enough to leave me some land, I could care less about the land, because I've got that audio and I can hear her voice, and
Yep.
really still feel close to her. So
Yeah, that's special. Very special. Well, I do appreciate your time, and like I do enjoy telling all of my friends that come on the program, I will see you around the bend, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and have a great day, and go leave a legacy.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
You've been listening to Legacy Cast. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to come back next time as we speak with more top influencers, industry experts, and business owners from around the world.